At the end of the First World War, my father was an officer in the British occupation forces in Germany. And he had a very distinguished career, and he was slated to be, when he was repatriated to England, he was slated to work for the British Foreign Office. And but then he met a German woman in Germany and married her. And of course, his bride, being German, was an enemy agent, because Germany was at that time the enemy. And so somebody married to an enemy alien. She was an enemy alien. So anybody married to an enemy alien could not be in the Foreign Office. So therefore, when he got back to England, they transferred him to the Home Office, and since he'd had a lot of intelligence work during the war, they put him to work for the MI5, and he was put as an interrogator also because he had quite a command of many foreign languages. So one day, a man was sent into him from intelligence. He'd come in from Portugal, which was a neutral country, and so the Germans used this country to filter through a lot of the enemy agents. And this guy was a tall, 6-foot, fair-haired, blue-eyed guy, came in. So my father said, "Would you mind telling me the purpose of your visit to England?" And he said, "Oh, no trouble at all. I'm a German agent. I'm a German spy." So my father said, "Well, that's very interesting. Would you care to tell me more?" He said, "Sure." So he gave him his mission, told him who his English contact would be, told him the name of his German controller, and he told him his mission and his cover story. And that was a very unusual thing for a spy to reveal, because the cover story is something very expensive to make, so you want to use it as little as possible in case it's penetrated. So that was a lot to uncover. So my father, having listened to all of this impassively said, "Well, as you might realize, we have a rather extensive knowledge and understanding of your systems and methods, and therefore I'm rather inclined to believe you," which I must say raises my curiosity as to why you should have told me this at all. He said, "Well, I'll tell you." He said, "I applied to the German Abwehr, which is the German military intelligence unit in Hamburg, and to be a German agent, and of course they looked deep into my background and discovered everything about me, except for the one thing I hoped they would not discover, which is that I'm a Jew." So I did all this for two reasons. One is as a method was to escape from Germany, and the other one was to come and work for you. So of course, when they have a double agent of that kind, you put him to work, which is what they did. So you get them to they tell him essentially, get on with the job. And so call in the second agent and the third agent, and then they would give him some real intelligence but insignificant stuff that was true but insignificant, so that he could pass it on to his contacts and give the Germans the impression that he was really getting some real stuff and really doing his job. And as a result of this, the network was rolled up. And my father eventually got decorated by the Queen, possibly for this, although one has to say this was a bit of luck that fell into his lap rather than credit to any skill on his part. So whether he got his decoration for that or something else, I've never been able to find out. I had a patient who worked for Canadian intelligence who tried to find out from MI5, but they would never tell him, even one of their colleagues. So anyway, maybe it was for some even more secret thing. Anyway, my father had a lot of stories of this kind, and there was another story where, again, a man was sent into him for interrogation. He was an old, 65-year-old man with an ear trumpet. It was in the days when hearing aids were not as developed as they are today, and so he had one of these old ear trumpets. And he asked him again what was the purpose of his visit to England from Europe, and he gave a long story. And again, something didn't quite add up. It didn't quite add up. And my father said it was a matter of intuition. There wasn't nothing that was provably wrong, but something that didn't quite sound right, you see. And he said it's a matter of intuition. You get to have an ear for these things. And he had technique for dealing with this. He would say, let's start all over again. So he said to this guy, look, there's something here that doesn't quite make sense to me. Let's start all over again. Let's forget all the things you've told me. Let's start from the beginning again. And he said, okay, I'm really so-and-so. All that was, I'm really so-and-so. And the so-and-so he really was actually a British intelligence agent who they were waiting to, they were expecting to come in to be debriefed. My father said, we're expecting you. We've got a car waiting to take you to London. Why did you tell me this cock and bull story? He said, well, Mr. Gold, this would be very, very difficult to understand. But that of course, was the cover story I was telling you. And for 2 years, my life has depended on this cover story, on telling this cover story. And psychologically, it was impossible for me to abandon it. And this story tells you what a dangerous and tense and fearful life a secret agent does lead. Well, there's another story of a similar but opposite kind. The Germans had the habit of of sending secret agents with the cover story that they were refugees from Nazi persecution. That's why a lot of genuinely Jewish refugees were at first interned by the British, because they might be on the suspicion that they might be enemy agents. For instance, there was a very famous scientist, Hermann Bundy, who was a genuinely Viennese Jewish refugee, a genuine refugee, and he was interned, but within 6 months he was working for the British Secret Service on radar. And so my father was interrogating this woman. He was surrounded by military intelligence officers. He was on a table, and he was this end, and the interrogee was at the other end, and there were 2 or 3 military intelligence agents on each side of the table. And he was interrogating this woman, who was claiming that she was the aforesaid kind of a refugee from Nazi persecution. And again, there wasn't something that wasn't adding up. And so he used his usual technique, but he changed it a little. He said, look, let's forget all this stuff you've been telling me. Just pretend I'm your physician. Pretend I'm your doctor, and tell me the whole story. And then at that point, one of the military intelligence agents ran out of the room. Well, it turned out, after the interrogation went on, this technique had worked. He found it very effective. And she finally admitted that she was a German spy. So my father was very annoyed, and he went out the side door and confronted this military intelligence officer who'd run out of the room and said, why? That was very rude. Why did you run out of the room? He said, I'll be honest with you, Mr. Gold, when you said, treat me as your doctor, if I hadn't run out of the room, I'd have burst out laughing right there on the spot. The other story I had about it was when he retired. You know, when British at that time, when British civil servants retired, there was a forced retirement. They had to retire at the age of 60. Actually, my father was carried on for 2 years because they thought he was very valuable. But at 62, he had to retire. Now, at that time, it was a Labour government. It was a very socialist government. And if you were unemployed at any time up to the age of 65, you were entitled to unemployment insurance, right? After 65, then you got old age pension. But before 65, if you're unemployed, no matter what your income, you got unemployment insurance. So my father, of course, had a very good pension, but he'd always paid his taxes. He'd always lived by the book. He paid every penny of, he took a pride in paying every penny of taxes. And his official car, he never allowed us, any member of his family, a ride in his official car. And when he had an official journey, he would write down the mileometer reading at the beginning and end of the ride. He was that meticulous. So he said to himself, I'm entitled to unemployment insurance. I'm going to apply for it. I don't need it, but I have a right to it, and therefore I'm going to have it. So he went every week to the Labour Exchange to get his unemployment insurance. And he went on doing this for several weeks. And finally, the officer of the unemployment agent went up and he said, you know, Mr. Gold, you do have a right to this unemployment insurance, but you have to realize you are supposed to be looking for work. And so I'd like to ask you, is there any sort of work do you think might interest you? And he said, do you have anything good in counterintelligence? That's the end of the story.